COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, the energy shock and inflation. Europe's economy has been rocked by a series of crises over the last 5 years.
Nobody would have predicted that we could have had 2 black swans in a row.
Il y a eu énormément de crises et on a su relever finalement les défis.
I think this mandate was a success for Europe.
So as Europeans get ready to go to the ballot box, in this episode we're assessing the EU's economic performance and prospects. How can the bloc boost growth and productivity? Is the Green Deal still on track? And do trading relationships with countries like China need a reset? Welcome to Realeconomy. In a moment, I'll speak to some of the key political players trying to steer Europe's economic destiny. But before all that, here's our crash course. The pandemic and the war in Ukraine have defined EU politics for the last 5 years. The huge €800 billion Next Generation EU fund was a historic economic response. Deployed to accelerate the bloc's post-pandemic recovery and green and digital transition, it saw member states issue joint debt for the first time. But COVID also forced Brussels to temporarily abandon its fiscal limits. Since then, many member states have racked up record debt-to-GDP ratios, an issue the energy shock and high inflation of 2022 only exacerbated. Recently reformed spending rules aim to bring these gradually back under control. But with post-pandemic funds also due to end in 2026, the big question now is, will Europe have the money it needs to invest and compete for the future?
What started with a virus so small your eyes couldn't see it has become an economic crisis so big that you simply cannot miss it.
COVID-19 saw the EU issue common debt for the first time. This historic move was most visible in the shape of the Next Generation EU fund. So how do MEPs view such a financial tool? Do they see it as a successful blueprint for the future, or should it go back to being economic taboo?
On n'aurait jamais pensé que, vous savez, dans cette guerre entre les frugaux et les pays du Club Med, on puisse s'entendre sur, pour la première fois, et c'est historique, un endettement en commun.
I see Next Gen EU as a prototype, and it's important that the prototype flies well so that we can indeed make it permanent.
A new investment mechanism must be created after Next Generation EU to invest on climate transition, on digital transition, on European Pillar of Social Rights, on defense.
Right now, if you have highly indebted countries, but they are able to tap in to this new box of Pandora, which is European common debt, when they are able to tap into that, well, it creates a whole new ballgame when it comes to finances. So we believe that it's a mistake and we should not go down that road.
So what's the EU Commission stance? Might it use such economic instruments again?
How can we participate to the global race for clean technologies, to the challenges of competitiveness, without a single euro of common financing? I think this is honestly impossible.
Recently revised fiscal rules aim to slash the debt built up during the pandemic. While this sees a return to the old thresholds of deficits at 3% and debt at 60% of annual GDP respectively, member states have been given more flexibility on how they go about debt reduction. But will there be enough money to pay for things like the green transition, especially with post-pandemic funding ending in 2026?
On the debt side, you know, we are struggling a lot with this. Nobody knows in this moment of time how to pay the interest rates. That's why that means interest opportunities for the next generation to invest. We need economic growth. That's the power base of Europe, that we are economically strong and we have to restart the engine.
As a whole, we can't say that the problem of the EU and the euro area is that we have a too high debt. It's a problem from single member states. We have to address it. We have common rules, but at the same time, we have to compete at global level.
If you want the investments that are needed for the green transition, for digital, for defense and all the rest of it to happen, Yes, we will need to borrow because not all of it will be able to be funded by cuts elsewhere or by new taxes. And indeed, some of it should be national borrowing and some of it should be joint borrowing by the European Union.
The idea that you support public investment through the EU level, I think, will plausibly stick around, because if not, we can probably give up on the Green Deal.
Another hot topic is trade with China. Brussels has accused Beijing of subsidizing key sectors while restricting access to its own markets. For now, the European Commission's policy has been to de-risk from China, but will it need to go further?
Ce doit être du win-win, gagnant-gagnant. Surtout, l'Union européenne doit arrêter la naïveté. La relation doit être une relation de partenaires commerciaux et bien évidemment continuer à travailler avec des partenaires à partir du moment où ils acceptent nos règles.
Let's go and try to talk to the Chinese how we can really create, how we can make agreements, and we should also accept that one country is maybe more competitive in maybe building electric vehicles, maybe building solar panels or wind turbines. Well, if the Chinese are willing to pay for our energy transition, by all means, then we can focus our resources on other areas.
To compete with other economic areas, we must be a bloc, an economic bloc. And for it, we must be sure that the internal market can work on this direction.
The first thing is stop being naive. I mean, China is protectionist, the US are protectionist, and then we would say, okay, well, we should not restrict access to our market because they will restrict access to theirs. They are restricting access to theirs.
We have to keep the economic ties, so nobody wants to stop them, but we have to rebalance that. And in such a strategic battle with the Chinese, we should be ready to defend our markets.
And finally, given the huge challenges Europe has navigated recently, what's the current economic picture?
Inflation is coming down. The ECB is, expecting to get back to target sooner, and they are also expecting to loosen sometime in the coming quarter. And so there is sort of a sense that there will be a turnaround in the summer, and the main driver here is that real incomes are recovering, with inflation coming down, wages catching up.
Reaction to the pandemic was unprecedented. The SURE mechanism, Next Generation EU. The reaction to the war was also unprecedented. The unity on sanctions, on the political reaction, on the decoupling from Russian gas. But if 2024 will see an acceleration of the activity, I think we will conclude that we were able to address these two black swans in the right way.
Indeed, we may all be forgiven for hoping the next electoral mandate is less tumultuous than this one.